I went to Kane College, which is now Kane University. And Kathy Dorsey Gaines, who's an African-American scholar, was the chair of the department that I was teaching. I was teaching part-time there. My kids were little. And she said, I want you to come and meet some families. And so the second study that we did, which was Growing Up Literate, was working with African-American families living in Newark. The first family in an abandoned building, just very, very challenging economic circumstances. But once again, we focused on kids who were doing well in school. So despite the odds, you know, what was happening at home, that the children were doing well in school. And that became Growing Up Literate, that study. I worked with families in Newark for about 5 or 6 years, just going in, hanging out, leaving and taking notes, writing down, collecting the things that the children had written. There were times when it was really very hard, because there were times when people were struggling to a point. One of the fathers died during the study. There was once we went in and the mother hadn't eaten for 2 weeks. We hadn't been in to see her, and she'd run out of money. The conditions were really challenging, and the families were these were families same as my family, filled with poetry, filled with their history. And the book Growing Up Literate came out of that study. And my understanding of race in America comes from working with Kathy Dorsey Gaines. We presented together, and we worked together on this in Newark for almost 5 years, and then wrote the book together. And it was, I think that it certainly had a profound effect on me. But I was very comfortable with the families, because, you know, I know you can't pull race out of it, but I understand what it's like to. So that was the second study.
Did you make that explicit when you would be with those families? Did you tell them your history?
No, I didn't, mainly because if there was a conversation and I was asked a question, absolutely. And we shared a lot, and we talked a lot about a lot of things. But I never tried to justify, you know. I suppose I could have done that, but I felt very much that I was learning from them much more than they were learning from me. And they gave me advice on child rearing, which I probably needed. You know, if you've got little kids, and I had little kids the same age as the children that we were in the families, and there isn't a family that isn't facing some challenge with their children. You know, so we talk about kids, but really life was so overwhelming for all of the families that we worked with. There were problems with the law, and one of the things that really troubled me greatly is that the mothers we worked with a lot more families than are in Growing Up Literate. The mothers would be taking courses at community colleges, but because of their school experience, they had to take classes to prepare for college. So what funding they got was gobbled up with these college courses, and then there was no money for college. And just the struggle, just the struggle to feed your children and not being able to get adequate medical care, and how we dealt with that. And this is not a study I could have done on my own. And Kathy was phenomenal, and we talked race all the time. And the power thing was just so important. I wanted to take in lots of coats and help out. And she would say to me, when you do that, then it's you that is giving, and we have to be equal. And I did take in some coats one winter, and one of the mothers took them to the market and sold them. And that was really a lesson for me. And it was a good thing, she needed the money, but I imagined people wearing the coats. But it wasn't charity that they needed, it was equality. Basically that study that I did in Newark, we moved to New Hampshire, and I wrote the study up when we were in New Hampshire. By that time, one of the mothers was in jail, in prison, and one of the fathers had died. And I actually read, I've never published an ethnographic study that I haven't shared with the people in the work. So I read each piece over the phone to the mothers that were in the study, because I was in New Hampshire. And there was this moment when one of the sons called and said, could I provide money for bail for his mother? And I did. I sent money, but I lost touch. I'm not sure what happened. I know that there was a very difficult situation, and I think that one of the things that working with the families in Newark did for me is to make me very comfortable in going into a community and working with people who are homeless, which is what I did when I went to New Hampshire. And it shifted, and I think Newark did that. We spent a lot of time in school with the children in Newark. We managed to get access, and we would go in and observe. And so part of the book that we wrote about it, Kathy and I, included the children's experiences in school. But I was also more and more caught up with how bureaucracies were impacting the lives of the families and not helping them at all. In fact, entirely the opposite, making it really hard for them to literally exist, and being so fragile. So much going on that just I can't think of something that happened, but one thing would just wash over them like a huge wave, and it would take a long time to put things back together again.